Thus I have heard. At one time, the Blessed One was dwelling in the royal domain of Vulture Peak Mountain with a great gathering of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One was absorbed in the samadhi of the many aspects of phenomena called profound appearance. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, looking at the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, saw the five skandhas and their natural emptiness. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, "How should a son of the lineage train who wishes to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom?" Thus he spoke, and the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva answered the Venerable Sharadvatiputra with these words: "Shariputra, those men and women of the lineage who wish to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom should look at it like this. The five skandhas should be seen purely in their natural emptiness. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form also is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, recognition, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are emptiness, and having no characteristics, they are unborn and unceasing. They are not impure or pure, or they neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no recognition, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no sensation, no phenomena. There is no quality of sight, and so on until no quality of mind and no quality of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance and no exhaustion of ignorance, and so on up to no old age and death, and no exhaustion of old age and death. In the same way, there is no suffering, no origin, no ending, and no path. No wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and abide by means of the profound perfection of wisdom. And since their minds have no obscurations, they have no fear. Transcending falsity, they attain nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times have relied upon the perfection of wisdom, and have become true and complete Buddhas of unsurpassable, perfect, and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the profound perfection of wisdom, the mantra of insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra which calms all suffering should be known as truth, for it is not deceptive. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is proclaimed. Teyata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasam Gate Bodhi Soha. Shariputra, this is how a bodhisattva mahasattva should train the profound perfection of wisdom. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and said to the bodhisattva mahasattva, noble Avalokiteshvara, that he had spoken well. Well done, O son of the lineage, it is so. O son of the lineage, since it is just so, the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced just as you have taught, and the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, the Venerable Sharadvatiputra and noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, and the entire gathering, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed.
Aye Dore Rewa Goye Song, Ale Sheda Jije Zibe Dong, Shaje Zowo De La Sowa De, Doje Chenpo De She Doje Jang, Doje De Lo Bo Da Na Ro Bo, Enjo Do Bi Bo Da Ade Shang, Nyā le shi la ji la su wan de, chāng bā tōng mi yi nye nā zhū de, chū de di vi de dāng zhā bin bin, si zā gu sā nu ni su ni ma, yā ji shi bi ji la su wan de, yā yā yu mi shu ji lu zhū na, dā wā zhā bā ri bi gu zhū ji, sā ji gu zhū bā bā yā zi su, sā bā dā bi ji la su wan de, ji zhū dā bi chū ngā a di shang, dā dā di bi mi bā zhū de ji, nian zhū dā ji gu qi su la su, dā dā la ma na la su wan de, Wang jie xin de zi jie zong ge ma, ge dao zhi bie wu shu jie zang jie, dong dian bie dao bo ke zhu jie, yao zi ji ba jie da su wan de, jiao su ge de la ma do jie jiao, an la ge de xian nie zi zong ne, 说到天幕不住自在边，人间拉玛那拉娑瓦的，大家苏拉给拉大耶命，耶桑他巴这边中，这边这边他跟这巴耶，三界千年那拉娑瓦的。 结我跟多样大那么能，人民绝对别那老千金，他当老人应得让多年，多久将给我，有多研究三界经，昨天就那老将就不多当年就做年，二月节节节变做那年。 阿拉别解三界诸法修三界，觉当作界就那拉将就不多当年就做，大业直接这边做那，多拉别解三诸法修三界就。 做界就那拉将就不多当年就做。 大约之间这边做那件，到了平时上街走过熊。嗯，你给的话过去嘛的，
Save durunche.
俺那天给的把啥的张罗当的给查的都让你的，这里差不多蛮大的大的。
Mindo rinche, kanga mindo. Save shirare.
哎呀，他俺做给得了啊，他俺做给得的，告诉我们确切谁的了，确切什么？ 确切是那么在那，我说南边三界边也，在阳城去了才不多，可是边那出入线的那出入两把地也，那他上的基本上都给嘛了。那我从两把地也搞的就是呢，南京这点的9、10年的中人呢，从的那些人就往这当把的，要是这个就送的高了，有我们那次的听不上，老给我们接个了。
We are here gathering in discussions of practicing Dharma, in other words, how to practice Dharma. So when it comes to how to practice Dharma, the practicing of Dharma, unlike other religious tradition, the Buddhist religion tradition, when it comes to practicing Dharma, it's practicing Dharma is always corresponding to how things really are. In order to, is to correspond to reality.
다 나서게 동봉에 나서게 취업을 지치냐 제와 때다 나서게 예 그런 관계 되는 나갈 때부터 투배 한번 예선에 다트에나 맞에나 뒤지네 그런 나서 그런 취소게 지 주어 대가랑 아니 때부터 때부터 보니 던지게 될 때부터 되기 아니 다 소지 친년 되요라 아니 나서게 선전대 다기 근데 상바다 제종 소리지게 나서 처음에 들려거든 나서 뭐지 말아 봐도 나서 그런 소선 되지 나가더니 여러 번 상대티 뭐 매도하지 추쇼 세너리 가르치 자원은 나서 보러라 또 버튼 한번 더 보지 문에기 지 한개 된지 나가더니 여러 번 더 보지 근데 되게 친년 조사게 세워 지켜지다는 저 매매게 신체 요소 더 봐대 근데 코치를 여러 상이 되지 나서 선발로 소화될 해지다 근데 나서 나게 선발될 걸 봐요.
So without effort, when we speak about, as soon as we are engaging in practice of Dharma, one should be able to visualize Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and being oneself in their presence and becoming oneself as a suitable vessel for receiving their blessings and their enlightened activities. And this is, sort of, we should always try ourselves when we are at the moment that one engages in the practice of Dharma, and one naturally have these visualizations. If one will be able to have this, naturally have this kind of visualizations, then this will really lessen our, negative thoughts and emotions, particularly the, anxiety and sense of, discomfort and so forth. So therefore, it is again entirely depends on whether we have taken our time to familiarize with this kind of practice and visualizations.
아야 땅가서 진이장 손이 조선의 사제 코너게 타니기 맞제와이 맞제비 온다 떠나야 로니도 맞아라 베비 힐라 베비게 아니 다 샤지리 이제네 담바생이 집에네 되게 거네 랑도진네 때동데를 따오는데 당근에 가서 매매다지 양생근이 집에 도와상이지 용사리 용사말이라 뭐 이제 저상다 본다.
So more than 2,500 years ago, the Buddha came to this world in the Shakya line and given this marvelous teachings of the Dharma, which is aimed towards accumulations of merits and purification of obstacles and so forth. And so when you think about this line, think about this. It is really, worthwhile and fortunate for all of us to be able to follow such a wonderful teachings that is given by the Buddha, which enables us to accumulate merits and purifying one's negativities.
아야 근데 저는 어떻게 타고를 거잖아요. 생비기 줄을 간다 자서래. 그러면 추생에 대한 양성에 근해지 인사 말에. temba teki chi nova dawa chi song ta chana su ngi jela maya na chana su nova re sangi chi na ya san chi yang sens ke ma ni chana su ngi jela maya yo go ngan sa chen den den do ba yin sa chen de ga la ni do chi char go do ni le ka du su chi che so na de go de yo go do le ka du chi che so na ni de bo so bo de chi go do se ni long to ji ne ni shi chi ma lo ba de de shang ye chi insa ma re ta ngue ji insa ma re 때문에 아주 제가 지지요만 깔려져 가르쳐 소소 다다 차노는 소소 대 가르쳐 딱 예봐도 제거에 지나 다 맞아는 좀 가르다도 서로 근데 전세 상황도 안 되는데
So now think about the Buddha has shown us the path that he has gone through, and that the path that he has embarked and attained as a result to a certain state of enlightenment. And so now we, as the followers of his footsteps, and then asking a question to ourselves by saying that is it something that is possible for me to be able to do that? If something that is not possible, you don't see that as something that's not possible or something that is not something that doesn't correspond to reality, and then it is a waste of time, taking our time in such a hot weather, and our time and energy. It's just a waste of time and energy. But if one really think there's a possibility of achieving what Buddha has achieved, and there's a worthwhile, it's a worthwhile to follow his teachings and follow his footsteps, then it is really a time for us, all of us, to really by making sure that one's time and energy that one has been spending are something that is worthwhile and purposeful.
아야. 너 뒤는 가르려서는 저런 지미 재미를 땜바 아래. 저런 저도 쟁라 때는 정발해서는 뒤고는 변두산되고. 근데 저도 쟁라 때고에는 저 가르를 때고래, 쟁 가르를 때고래. 생에 되게 제사산나 동토나 아니 제대기 로도들이 이치til에서나 아니 저다마고 가서 렌델을 제대 비하다 배타와서 왜 제세대로.
So now, for this, we need to think about how everything's are coming into being. There's nothing coming into being from nowhere. It all has its own causes and conditions, including oneself. How we came to this world as a human beings, what kind of causes and conditions that is required for us to become a human beings. And as a human beings, we are all coming into being by depending upon its own corresponding causes and conditions. And it is that too. So without causes and condition, it is not possible for us to be here as a human beings. So therefore, when you think about that, then when you think about it, we are actually coming into being due to one's causes and conditions. So what kind of causes and conditions that's been required to be oneself as a human beings in this world? And so when you think in this, when you engage your thought processes of the causes and condition of oneself, then one will be able to reflect one's mind on the law of cause and effect, which is the perfect view, the mundane perfect view, which is needed for us as a foundation to practice Dharma.
아야. 저도 쟁라 때가 켈린 사디 니 제들을 년에게 졌을래요데 도마메바네 다다바도 용에 다네 타마바도 용에게 아니 렌데게 때도 집에 다 생이 지금 년에 전에 아니 진주게 라도 전에다 도와지 됐으나 니 뭐네 저시만 도와게 된다 그렇지 뭐네 네바도 제거로 진세 가르잖아 맞어 그거 춘춘을 대린 호셔 제거 진세 가르잖아 그로 자기 춘춘라 강에 메트게 된다라 하면 얘는 몇개 제거다 프로칼에 적었다 하버드 맞다 단다코스 버버지는 선이 내가 만드는 데네 선이 데리 내가 만드는 선이 문제 얘기 강에 쳐야 돼 선이 편저 여비 제세 또 되러 데리 조도고는 선이 내가 제거 계기하면 가서 선이 조도고는 데리 내가 제거 계기하면 내 너에게 데네 타투는 사제게 살아 말어 봐도 얘기 내게 때도 집에 다들 로고요나 아니 되게 로데데 라니기 제도마도 재미 재미아바지 원래로나 아니 세디기 데 로자친적이 데치세나레 아니 또고 당선이 된다라 칼레 저거나 이게 와지레로잖아 아니 이제 지 소소소라지 제거 상이게 아니 세와세나레 아니 차이세나레 근데지 용 고야래도 왜 내세되나
So then when we think about the causes and condition of ourself, oneself, in other words, and then there's a cause that is known as the substantial cause of oneself, which is continuity of responsible for, giving a birth to the success of lifetime and the future lifetime, in other words, success of future lifetimes. And so when we, reflect upon this matter, then one will be able to think of the self, which really becomes a basis for having the karma, the basis of existing karma, in other words. And the self, when you come to realization of self being the basis of karma, of law of cause and effect, then one will be able to automatically be able to understand, the life after death. Not only this life, but rather, there's a life after death. So just as we, educate our younger generations and a young child, and the reason why we're educating a young child, the children, by providing an education to the children, is because we all have the same goal, that the children will not face, financial burden in their future, in their future time, in the future. So all of the reason why we are putting a lot of efforts and energy for our children's education is to have a better life for them in the future. And then similarly, we are, working today is to benefit tomorrow. We know that tomorrow exists. We are working today is the reason why we are working today is not only to benefit today itself, but we are thinking about tomorrow. If I do not work today, there will be a problem tomorrow. In the same manner, when the Buddha talks about the Dharma, importance of engaging in the practice of Dharma, is to now, since you have seen there is a possibility of having a future life, and the future life, whether or not one's future life will become a positive or negative, it depends upon one's own causes and conditions, then will, naturally enables us to understand the importance of engaging in actions that will become a positive causes and condition for one's future life. So this is how we should think about ourselves, and in which by thinking in this way, one will be able to cultivate love and sense of connectedness for oneself.
Oh yeah. Dele kode washena. Maso ni jichenla sede wasena yani tal kobe tats bena nga sengedela ni ran shin to nga shushugi chade nga sengede maso ge loba zende dechi. Yani tanya tsanche nga de ni dene joa ne sero ne ni saja sabada logore se kete tachi. Ta tene yode tana nga do sede ge pumbo de ni tana nga di pumba de ne deba nga hira. 맞은 뒤에 콤바들을 좀 주셔서나 이는 콤바신다 질라네 좀 요 콤바신다 지 다시 마다래 다. 요 콤바 지잖아 콤바 야이라도 콤바래. 이는 소소를 제제 차제면은 이는 콤바도 제 되는 게 콤바도 제목으로 봐도 이는 내가 좀 콤바 제목으로 봐나 이게 로엘이 자기 찌땡 거 제대로. 예 뭐에 저 나래마도 사직이 최께지 싸워지는 말이야.
So, as we spoke earlier about the self being the basis of all the law of cause and effect, of one's law of cause and effect that one has accumulated. So now here, the question is, so what kind of self that we are talking about here? Are we talking about the self that is independently existence, or self that is in and of out, it exists in and of ourselves? This is not the self that we are talking about. The self that we are talking about here is the conventional self, the conventionality of self, which become a basis not only for causes and law of cause and effect, but it becomes a basis of one's own state of enlightenment, right from now all the way to the state of enlightenment. And the conventionality, the conventional self, that is what we are talking about. So we are not actually rejecting that conventional self. We're not talking about, nor we are talking about the self that is independent existence. We're talking about the mere conventionally existence, or the mere imputed by thoughts and concept. That is the kind of self that we are talking about. So when you have this kind of self, the self will go on, keep on going. This kind of self will, continue to take a rebirth from one life to another life in a countless times. So what we are changing here is now only that the psychophysical aggregate that we have, the aggregates will be left behind. Whatever the aggregate that we have at this point, form, feeling, composition factors, and so on and so forth, will be left behind. Just as when we are, when our existing house is become, no longer a condition to live in this particular house, and we look for a new house, isn't it? We need to buy new, either buy or we need to rent, and then we have to change that house from one house to another house. Is because that house is no longer needed, or no longer be a condition to be lived. So therefore, in the same manners, when this psychophysical aggregate that we have at this point, when all these psychophysical aggregates are becomes no longer servable, or no serviceable for us, becoming a basis for existence of ourselves, then it naturally changes and getting a new psychophysical aggregate in the future life.
아야, 다 된대게 너무 많아 대바 투비 한번 다른데. 아니 회사에 되게 나가 되니라. 아니 시행제 되게 넘버 손 신비 넘버 지라지. 아니 되는 소리 자가 이제 밴도. 아니 배 컨텐츠 좀. 아니 타나라니 이제 전쟁 모두 지나면 강해 버지. 지미 버지 도와야나. 아니 제가 되게 제거래. 근데 랑 전쟁인데 배 맞아 되게 나래 신이 제비가라 남아서 가잖아 맹에 되게 라고요. 저 라마카세 세디신의 산나동에서 안바데 페샤카세 라우초초여서 되는 민바체 소소기 디지털인데 맞아. 그래서 치치 삼바나다 나바 다베토네. 그래서 대바 예베토네 치치치치나. 아니 셰바 친척이 남아야 터져네. 아니 지 넘버 대다 대시샤와 넘버지. 아니 저 근디저 남아는 뭐체가이나 넘버 투병 한번 더 보지라야. 아니 랑게 되냐 남카데니나 뭐소여서. 아니 라다라냐게 네 타고도 네 서제 요소 줘봐대네. 지 대화되지 동해면데 네 동해면데 나의 동해 매고도 소매시 되게 많이 선나동인데 이제 되게 저다래서 아니 되는 식으로 남한테다 쳐서이 나서 저기 쳐마다네 상여되지 않아 아니 사절이 미베대바다 서제 미베 이제를 지금 그에 네 매바던 저지잖아 네가 마치 내버쳐야.
So it is now visualizing the teacher, the Buddha, who have shown us the unmistaken path all the way from the ordinary state to the state of enlightenment in this space, who is then surrounded by all those great Indian masters, as well as the Tibetan, the great masters of Tibet, Tibetan great masters as well. And so such visualizations, then followed by all other teachers from whom you have received the teachings or the spiritual connection, in other words. And one should have this is naturally arising within one's mind. One should try to do that. It's not just during the teaching time, nor that when one is actually being in the meditative states or practice of visualizations, but this is always, you are ever ready to be able to have this practice, including one's own, teacher from whom you have received the Dharma teachings and so forth. And normally the gurus, the teachers will always say that it is, when we ask you that how many gurus that you have and what kind of gurus, what kind of teachings that you have received from this such and such gurus, and then you will have to think and you will have to count, slowly, and then just keep thinking, taking your time. But if someone asks you how much money that you have in bank, and you have ready to say right away, I have this and this. So this is, how we should familiarize ourselves with thinking of all those gurus from whom that you have received the teachings, right from beginning, from the teacher Buddha Shakyamuni, and then the lineage gurus of the Indian masters, and lineage gurus of the the Tibetan masters, and so on and so forth. One should ready to say that when someone asks you that how many gurus that you have, those are the gurus that I have. So this is how you should be able to ready to present that, not only just verbally presenting, but mentally you'll be able to visualize as vivid as possible. This is how you should, so we should be. So then with this kind of visualizations, and one should think about in their presence one's of being a human being, as a human form, and surrounded by all other sentient beings who have a similar wish to achieve happiness and overcome sufferings, although they have a keen desire for achieving happiness. They are unable to engage in the actions which becomes a constant condition for giving rise to happiness and so forth. And think of all the sentient beings and being there in presence, and then asking the object of refuge that you are the only refuge. There's no one else that I could rely on but you, as the Buddhas and one's own lineage gurus and so on.
这些了说明没把这鸟对呢，你可这等鸟的这恰路了，然后通过这些叫现在啥都搞不过去，那西边搞了比不能这边搞的经用不了，别说等路边搞了，你最终嘛现在说这样都没有了，刚才我那个，那当年嘛现在去继续这边搞了，这把那些这把当就没把这鸟都能做什么样，能做教育呢？你确定你飞机刚才对美国上这样了。
So it's very helpful when the guru actually gives you the instructions of those visualizations, then just instead of trying to visualize the visualizations after guru has finished giving the instructions, instead one should follow the instructions and follow your visualization at the same time will really makes a big difference. And in other words, by becoming a familiarization with one's mind. So when guru is going through this instructions of the visualizations, just word by word, one should follow that. As we have a saying that when one verbalize the verses, the wonderful verses, the sublime verses of the Buddha's teaching, one should follow mentally the sublime meditation along with that. And so let's do this visualization for a minute.
But you should want. Yeah, that you know, Chibachi, Gossenbashi, should any Shanjo Larich and watch it. And this Shanjo Larich and Matai such is Sheche. Chubutsimba Timbishan, the body chawas, and Dangali Kibachi, Church chawas. Chawanida de Mechela, and Sheche Tashaw. Dambanga, how much at that is pass. This such a shitty. You turned on the chai, teacher.
So with this motivations, maintenance of maintaining the positive motivations, one is then receiving the teachings of great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment, which has the four major outlines, which begins from the greatness of the authors given in order to exhibit the it has a noble source, and the second outline is showing the greatness of the teachings in order to engender respect for the teachings, and the third, how to listen to the teachings in which both teachings and its authors are great, and the fourth is the sequence in which the disciples are to be taught the actual instructions.
Then Marcasa, Dambanga, how much at the tree in Balani, launch it our senior Timbits, then the watch at the Manins. Majanaji, Anabitual and Joey and Karacha was the Tuapangana, for which you get set on the Mate, Nick get set on the Matene, Gagin, Consum Banagiti, in Cheronia nature with Salana, but Laricha will get such a Yodola.
So then the fourth outline has two subdivisions of how to rely on the teachers, which is the root of one's spiritual path, and how the students then train their mind after having relied on the teachers. So this actually entails that when we ask ourselves, in other words, what kind of practice that you are doing, is that, well, I follow the teachings that has been taught by my teacher, and whatever that is teaching that he has given, the instruction that he has given, that is what I am following in a step by step, in a sequential order. Then the answer to this question actually encapsulates entire outlines of the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment.
That ten Lojata in Balani, they tell a Nimbolim Bishuan, Nimbochatan Bisuni, Tomodi, Nimbochatan Bisuloni, Naji, Najalan, Nimbolim, Much, Tomodi, Nimbolim Simula song, Chubichunga, that more and larger Manas and Chubin Chimbi larger Manas and CH, Tomboni. Da Chibechimbi larger Manas la song, teaching Jubu, Santa Pana de Sandich, that Chibichu, Sanchi, the Shabba, CH, Tomboni. The Zabalo song sent in the Nova Logo Bijan saying, Tashir Rao, Sanja Manduva Demo, Nova Logo Rembani Shiva, Achet, the money. Now Nova Logo Rembani Shivani, Tibachim Bachola, the Cheba the Dojetibana, the Bola song, Shansan Lava Lodes, Jana Jata, numbers of Zone Chetan, the Chuech, the money. Zone Chetan, Bicelani, Kala Lobizir, Delaman, Telecheta, the Bach, the money. Telecheta, the Rembani. Shubachella Lodeba, Cheba the Pasha Tamani, Omodri. Pasha Tamani Lodeba too, Chanel out of Pia Sheba, anything in the Kujudiji Demba, Chanel out of Teninga Gongabi, Jatsia, Boring about social logic, Mongadri. The social logic and Chanel lot of Haton lots of Omodri, Haton lots of Jet, Haton so the lot of them, Gambel, Haton of the young, Haton going to Gambel, Haton to be Sage. Hatombola song, and that down in their Sura Mazo. Ludu Gomadi with Sijan, Tomani Jatawatela, Achi Tomani, Tomani Jatawatela, the Conan and Jubilee, the Conan and Delapipa, Mochi, Tomandi, the Conan Delgomani, Gajan Mazo, Jakaba, the Taranka in Lucia, Shibatela, and Tawajila Jubilee, Bani, Jakaba, the Taranka in Lucia, Asi, in the Yena, and then Mazato. 상제게 살란도와라 아니 서버다 자치와니 양산레고에 되는 상추 세게 셈베도네 아니 돈이 도베게 아니 셴나다 파도니 림바셰다 양산레 아니 양산레베도는 조 아니 돈이 도발라 가장 문진다 가장 문진비달라 점바데 용어다 셴나 조타마와 제이노에 따와텔라 베베달라 아니 만다와 제이 노예네 맞아 거스 봐봐 뭐마 타라니게 아니 따와세 그래레스 아니 된대지 거스 봐야레스
So, so when in practicing Buddha Dharma, the purpose of engaging in the practice of Buddha Dharma is to learning the path, which is profound and extensive path, referring to the wisdom, letting emptiness, and bodhicitta. And this unity of the practice of the unity of wisdom, realizing emptiness, and bodhicitta is inevitable practice of Mahayana Buddhist practitioners, Mahayana Dharma practitioners, in other words. So then when it comes to the wisdom realizing emptiness, one should understand the object of refutations, what is being refuted, in what, by refuting what kind of object, through refutation of object of negation, one will be able to, actualize what is meant by ultimate nature of reality. So therefore, in this, when it comes to this object of ultimate nature of reality, there are different ways of accepting or the propounding this ultimate nature of reality in accordance with the four philosophical tenets of the Buddhism. And out of all, we have, during our last session, we have covered the refuting misinterpretation of the Svatantrika and the Prasangika's distinctions. So as today, we are on the chapter where it presents the interpretation of the distinction between interpretation of Svatantrika and Prasangika.
안되지. 대양 아주 조다만 제 계시시 비가라 내가 지 다음에 되면서 지레레가 거 지고 거할래 레면도 nenjobachi ni tawagin jori yel nyane che bekola so tai chen de la bekola ni tende thara ge thonen lo yi rinba che ne ni thama de ma thaja ba de lo de kasa ge ji nyane ge rinba ra lo kwa ma do ya taw me de mo mo chi ge ji ji den choba je so ji ko ye rem do.
So here again, when we talk about that different views of ultimate nature of reality in accordance with the four philosophical tenets of the Buddhism, that doesn't mean that they're having a completely, contradictory way of accepting and having a lot of argument among themselves. This is, however, is not so. All those, the presentation of the ultimate nature of reality in accordance with the four different tenets are all designed for one person to understand, one individual to understand the subtlety of dependent originations. It is the practitioners who can be able to gain the sudden knowledge of subtlest form of dependent originations by going through the process of all those four philosophical tenets. It is stepping stone. The lower philosophical tenets are stepping stone for the higher, for philosophical tenets, the view of high philosophical tenets. It is the lower it serves as a stepping stone for advanced state of spiritual ultimate nature of reality. It's and finally going through those process, one will be able to able to reach the view of Prasanghikas, which is the subtlemost dependent understanding of dependent originations. It is also the lower views becomes the wrapping of the view of higher views. So that's what it says. No.
한조 라지비 루 수숑네 랑게 루자바 니저나 저나스 니가 또 번제에 대저바 샤오스데.
So now it is setting forth our own position. During our previous sessions, we're all, we are, talking about the others' positions, right? That how those other positions are propounding their way of presenting this different originations and ultimate nature of reality and so on and so forth. Now, from this chapter onwards, is the setting forth or the presentation on one's own positions, where it says, explaining how Prasanghikas set forth their own system, where refutation of Svatantrikas bring about the understanding of both systems. So this is how I will proceed, what it says. So here it says, explaining how the Prasanghikas set for their own system via a repetition of the Svatantrikas bring about an understanding of both systems. So this is how I will proceed. Here it says. So that clearly tells us that once you are able to understand why one is actually refuting this Svatantrikas, views, and why the Prasanghikas actually refuting or the negating the Svatantrikas view, it not only that will let you understand the Prasanghikas view, the presentation of their ultimate nature of reality, but you will also understand the Svatantrikas proponents of ultimate nature of reality. That is what is meant by saying that the lower system or the lower, philosophical viewpoints, understanding of lower philosophical viewpoints will become a wrapping cause for the understanding of the higher philosophical tenets.
Yeah. Digi yung kasengani di gangi yung se chunju de tendo ye do don de da dana de le chuje tena wa se ye nga go chi gi shugo chi le zeba zwengi de zeba zesa ninga de la ni tumo yi chuje ji xia chen de 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 ne du xia do ye re ye ma le se zeba ze chuje tena wa se ye de yung chen de le ka tu de ra le do.
So therefore now when two positions opponent and component, oneself and then others, when we are having some kind of dispute, and there should be a subject upon which the basis as a subject, as a basis of one's dispositions. So this subject must be understood. The subject must be understood by both the parties. oneself and an opponent, one's opponent and oneself. Without having the basis of this common subject, there's no basis for dispute. There's no basis for argument.
예, 가세는 바 되니 가서 오미존라 하냐 정에서 존재 되니 존재 코로라게 수도여리 니가라 저바가 다르스 저기에나 가서 저기에나 제제 티나온다 우마 텐도세 되니 존재 코로 수도 때네 니코 저바여리 이제다.
So in the monastery, that's on this subject or the common subject for oneself and the opponents, there's a lot of debate on it. It is a separate subject for the class that is given by the teacher, just mere focusing on the common subject.
게다 침부려라.
Oneself and opponent. That's all.
존재님보다 게다 침부려라 바서바 우마 가사 우마 주비 거라 존재 게다 쳐니래라다. 우마 텐도 제제 티나와.
This is one of the well-known debate of common subject is one of debate on common subject is well-known debate in the monastery. The well-known debate of the Madhyamaka.
야, 됐습니다. 내가 치세를 모두 손자 치예wen지네 내내 조던 바 이베 내가니 런지 수종왕 어당 예 당了民众去了广播了你确诊的主马主数据决定吧当决定电视讲马主个电报我广播了你这个就把当这个我广播呢说的。
So then Chandrakriti's Clearword has a great deal to say on this matter, but I'm worried about excessive the verbiage. So I will touch only the main point here. There are two divisions: the actual refutation of autonomous argument, and the second, why the faults we find in the autonomous arguments do not apply to us, which is in chapter 21. And that the actual refutation is autonomous argument. That the first of this has the two divisions.
东北年说的，更电脑是最先的送把南极，南呢将新的报告完他也，最先的最长的线呢，这个都记得记得这没到介绍完了，觉得确实你今年中了引起前半年满意的，前半年呢就是爸爸当就是爸爸下雨，他那边把交了，也他给点中央全部写了兄弟。 전진안에 대라르 진보를 또 안에 대라 파르고라 아주 근데 나키 된지네 제니 진안에 대라니 사제바나 아주 바이노 대전 제자바 드라마타바 단자와나 시비 전진나 대전라마주 근데 뭐바세와 샤와 이나네 대랑라 마주바 이노 대제베 지리바 지바와 게데 저다 제바 이나네 대상제바 랑라 마주바 이라 에데 주메바 이나네 대파르볼라 마주바 이데 이시르 제탄 데르 추다 취지 제장신 zemba 대전도 내양 체바도이 취지 장신 zemba 저로 시나 시보스 세세
Demonstrating the fault, demonstrating the fault, a fault that pertains to the position, namely the basis of the subject of an autonomous syllogism, is not established. Demonstrating that because of that fault, the reason is also not established. The subject of an autonomous syllogism is not established. The section has two parts, and stating the Bhaviveka's beliefs and refuting it. What the Bhaviveka believes is the passage from Chandrika is clear on this point appears to be exceedingly difficult to understand. So let me explain by citing and explaining a passage from the clear words. It says, how in the thesis sound is impermanent, both the subject and predicates are construed only in a general sense, not with the specific qualifications. If they were taken under specific qualifications, the conventions inference and what is inferred would cease the conventions, would cease to exist. Sorry. For example, if the subject were construed as a sound that evolves from the four great elements, it would not be established for the other party in the debate, the Vaisheshika. And if it were taken as a quality of the space, the subject would not establish for us, the Buddhist. Likewise, when the Vaisheshika advance that the thesis sound is impermanent to some case opponents, if sound is construed as a produced sound, then it would not be established for the samkhya's. On the other hand, the sound is construed as a something that becoming manifest, then it would not be established for the Vaisheshikas themselves. That's all.
되게 단단치는 가르치는 그나 넘버 사제 버치 예시로 버치라 드라치체 메타바이 데 샤바이 비세르 로와이나 네 된주게 드라데 드라치 산질에 샤그르마도 시로바데 드라자나 넘버를 주고 말이 넘버데 드라자나 시로바 주고 말이에요. 단단데.
So now here, if one takes a sound as a common subject, then this common subject sound must be the way of existing of the sound, being impermanent and so forth, must be accepted by both the parties. Otherwise, this cannot be a common subject. It says that because this will not establish for oneself, and it should be the subject must be established for oneself and other parties, one's opponent. In other words, if it doesn't establish for one or another, then there will be no basis for actually object. I mean, for the debate that debate will not proceed the debate without having a common subject. So therefore, this is what we were talking about here, is importance of having a common subject that is seen by both the parties.
나가서 최제티나 주무듯이 계좌를 최제세디 때는 실업하기 다다발라고 남배 담다발라고 다들 최제적으로 시 근데 이게 때 니가를 팅그래 팅 말했을 계좌.
So because the non-Buddhists was actually proponents, the non-Buddhist proponent of the sound is the sound being permanent. It is a permanent phenomena. Whereas the Buddhists, the sound is not a permanent, it's impermanent. So therefore, the sound cannot be a common subject for both the parties. I mean, both the parties.
네 때문에서 지난번에 내 조마서 다니 네 때문에서 상제비 치라발라 담다바 단자바나 종지제 자시 최제의 존나 셰다발라 민주 나기인데 자 최제의 셰나 네 랑라 민주 예전에 셰다베장 세제발라 담다바 단자바나 셰비 자시 최제의 존나 세제발라 민주 나의 제제 세워시비 자시 최제의 존나 네 랑라 민주 대나서.
So then likewise, however, it plays in an argument, destructions when qualified as something that requires some other cause and production itself is not established for us Buddhists And where it's qualified as something that is causeless, it is not established for the other party. The Vaisheshikas, therefore, just as the subject and the predicates are taken only in the general sense in above case. Likewise, in the present case, it is the mere subject without a particular qualification that is so understood in this. This is what the Bhaviveka says. This means that when the Buddhist advances the thesis, sound is impermanent to the Vaisheshika. If sound that evolves from the elements is taken as a subject, it will not be established for the Vaisheshikas. If the sound has the quality of the space, it is taken as a subject, then it will not be established for us. Likewise, when the Vaisheshikas themselves advance their thesis, sound is impermanent to those Samkhya's who are manifestationist. If sound as something they produce were taken as a subject, it would not be established for the manifestationist. Let's take a 10 minutes break.
Tena susun deba temo mimba chuje de zonga mirong deso. Chuje ne gowa nige cheba je chue shue bi je yinbe. Nige teno de zhuba shi gobi sharo. Gobi sharo sondo. Gobi sharo sondo. Ta tepa to lotion washi chena. Mani tenda yesa dekhi jari na mi tondo londa na.
If the sound is something that previously existed and comes to be manifested through the certain conditions were taken as a subject, it will not be established for the Vaisheshika's proponents. Therefore, it is impossible to use as a subject something that is incompatible with one's own individual belief system. That's all.
Yeah. Ta tanji na gire na so ki chuje tena dashi ja tena date mata ba yeme dugwa yin zane je date ni shi patse ba tsengen da tse ba tse san yin ka ye timo de ta tan ji go re es tera.
So what is really, what is the main theme of this, arguments or its presentation here is that if, for instance, if we are establishing a sound as impermanent, so both oneself and an opponent must have a common basis or the common subject, which is the sound. So the sound being subject, and what is being established, what one is trying to establish, this sound is impermanent. You are establishing the sound as impermanent and letting the other person be convinced of sound being impermanent. For that, both the parties must see eye to eye on the subject itself, sound subject as a subject. Sorry.
Ta na so nge de shiro ban de ba de do ta mi shi ma do. Shiro ba de se ki dase de nang ki yen de chin ma je che de la da.
So, although I do not know much about the non-Buddhist philosophies, the little thing that I know about the non-Buddhist, the proponents of non-Buddhist, is that it's particularly the ancient Indian, philosophers, non-Buddhist philosophers. They propound the sound being at the quality of space.
呀，他这是不是的嘛？就他去年听到的主播哥吧，电线都去没大帮七八的嘛，是比结账细，你个了主播多的，这样别个吧啦，听到的主播细，留下主播我都哥吧赢了，别电线都我们别米了说吧，能给进去，如了说吧，细进去能。大理叫我们把现在的主播，现在叫我们把让的我们往那，我们往了主播那，点比米了说吧，先确定的容纳让人民主，准备米了说吧，先确定的容纳，去了把了。帕鲁波了民主被切巴点的我的米的数张西确定的就得啥，我们把当我们一直大力叫啊，原面老说的切巴就确实比些人呗，你给听到的主播隔壁小老娘的上把我，去见听到的主播这样的，我学个了才嘛见着我西，主播才嘛点着西。给他过了主管，我说
And given the subject is the basis that both parties analyze in this established as appearing in common to both, just as they must establish a commonly appearing subject. So too, both side must establish the predicates, impermanence, only in the general sense, without particular qualifications. Also, they must take place. Therefore, they prove the probanda. The situation is similar when the mathematical proof to non-Buddhists the non-existence of the something that is produced from itself, whether it is an internal sensory source such as the visual faculty or the external sensory source such as a form. And when we prove to Buddhists, that establishes a sort of Buddhist essentialist that there is no production from others. If we were to use a real I, for instance, as a subject, it would not be established for us. But if you use an unreal I as a subject, it would not be established for the other parties. Hence, giving up such specificity, we must use the mere I to mere form as a subject. Why? Because it must be established and commonly appearing to both parties, in as much as it is the basis that both Madhyamaka and essentialists analyze in order to see whether there is a specific qualities such as being produced from itself. This is what Bhaviveka think. To establish appearing in common means the proponent and opponents use the same kind of valid cognition to establish it.
对，他这个这个学了巴了吧，这么大把主播那这么大把也没得事情嘛的，而且我们之前呢，大连嘛以前那面是的，学了巴了大进步吧生意的做的是，如说就叫那大连叫我们的粤语系的老板告诉了，你去听到这主播嘛的是，嘛的是呢，现在了两把主播给打死了，你哪把上去把开两个嘛的，你准备给你打死米了说吧老玩意呢。你学了巴了主播嘛的，你相当于了，你如说就去那大连叫我们把主播告诉了，直接听到的个嘛的，也是季节。
So it's clearly mentioned in here. It says, where it says that, when the situation is similar when the Madhyamaka proof to a non-Buddhist, the non-existence of something that is produced from itself, whether it is an internal source, internal sensory source, such as the visual faculty, or the external sensory source, such as form. And when we prove to the Buddhist, essentialist, that there is no protection from others, if we were to use a real I, for instance, as a subject, it would not be established for us. But if we use an unreal I, it says, right, as a subject, it would not be established for the both parties, and for the other parties.
Dechi. Pena nga tsu derwa, zu le ina zu da le chegu mare, shen le chegu mare, inga le chegu mare, jime le chegu mare, se de uma tangyo tumo ma ina che. Bombo ale.
But let's take an example of form in accordance with the Madhyamaka Prasangika's standpoint. The form is doesn't produce from self, or form doesn't produce from others, nor the form produced from causeless. That's all.
Dache kelinge de shirobachi. Ini jenche kelinge de shiroba mazeda. Nade ini susu chena demba tuba re senge ye. Ini yonsu zoba ye ini zu shen le chegu le salaus.
The produce from self, the form produced from self is propounded, propounded by the non-Buddhist philosophers, and form that is produced from others, which is propounded by the essentialist.
Yeah. The tini ka yin because ini rana ki deba ta chi cheso ina chiche tina de tuba yungo ma res de ta chi chi. Mona chiche tina de tuba kande chi go re sa so na ini tande. Ini sugar la sema kande chi so soba tsesa de la ini kande mane soba tsenge de la kande chi go na ya soba tsesa de la taran sema so na chi go res. Yungo bi de tsesa wala sema so se di.
So therefore, if those are this is the different proponents with regard to the form. So therefore, we'll not find a commonly appearing subject, right? There's a different way of establishing the form. So therefore, what is needed to really become authentic syllogism for both proponent and an opponent? Then it says, to establish a pairing common means that the proponent and opponent use the same kind of visual cognition to establish it.
Kasa chiche tino de truso na de chi gore senge de ta cho de peti jo de tabo ni nge tu mu ma do mo bi ne tile she na chiche tino de tru mo de se de ni go shu go ni ga le chima tino de tru ba chi gore se de do di na
So it's
timba no se ba tim
that's all. Apparent common means the proponent and the opponents use the same kind of visual cognition to establish it, right? It says, for instance, the way the form exists, must be established for both the parties, opponent and proponents. Because if the two parties, both proponent and opponent, has a different way of understanding the form, then it cannot be a common appearing of commonly appearing subject.
ya ta ni ba te ga ba se pi gong ye de ba je ba che ni chiche tino tu se de rang lu le che de ba ta de ni ba te da ga ba se de ta gong ye de jen de ba je ba ni ba ta de ga yun de ga la ni ba te da ga ba la ni le me te ba ta pe ko ba men da wa o mo ne si se le so.
So then it is refuting that. It says this has two parts, showing that the meaning is incorrect, and the next is showing that the example cited is not appropriate.
Si se le chi de ne te ta ma yin te de ta gang ge sen de de che wa ka ba tu ba sai chu su de ba di se de ko na di te chi ji shi jin lo zang ji da ge mo bo nie ba ne nyang ba jo wan de ran ni ji ke lang ba ni do shi jin lo da shi ji ma lo ba da ne ta de ba yin no 이 시를 강게 세 저리제 자신을 소바 다 시진로기 여바 마인바 여바 니든 zembe 이세네 여바 제비 차다 미바 갈란죠 강게 세라리 제 마인베 자실라 소바다 시진 마로바 양다바 마인바 좀면도바 이세나 강게 나데 균조도 여바 여바 마인반지 차자에 미바 갈라유 대니지 셔르 로벤디 신가 내지 개대고 알레 대 신가 내지에서 이바도 좀 비자죠.
The meaning is the meaning is incorrect. Chandrakirti square word states that this is not like that, and is instead as follows. So far as one accepts the refutation of the production as the probandum in this demonstration that I, etc., are not ultimately produced. And the subject, the basis of that probandum, and it's something found to have its own existence by the inaccurate consciousness breakdown in a reality, and therefore it will be argued there would be no commonly appearing subject. He and the Bhaviveka himself must accept that this is so inaccurate and accurate consciousness are different. Therefore, when the inaccurate consciousness take what is non-existence as existence, as in the case of someone with the eye disease, seeing and falling hairs, it does not perceive even to the slightest degree at the subject that exists. When an accurate consciousness does not reify what is unreal, as is the case of someone without eye disease looking for this imaginary falling hair, this does not perceive even to the slightest degree object that are non-existence. So far as they are merely conventional, that is what the Master Narayana himself stated in the refutation of an objections.
대니지 셔르서 로베제 신가 내지 개대모손 라소비 변진가시 미나네 주방 도바 시나 게 메싱가라 내가메 제소 강게 셔르 대다 시진 로바다 마로바 타데바 이 셔르 시진 마로비 내거나 시진 로바 여바 아인비 샤나 강시 준이 된지 미 견조바 갈라에 이 셔르 셔마주비 쇼지 저다 셔마주비 땡시지 저도바 메바 델레 마임바 니도 셔바오 오소
And sensory perceptions and so forth could actually perceive something, then there would be something to prove or to refute. But as they do not, I cannot be faulted. Since inaccurate and accurate consciousness are the difference in this way, inaccurate consciousness cannot exist when accurate consciousness is present. So how could the conventional I, as a subject of a syllogism, exist for an accurate consciousness? Therefore, since there is for Bhaviveka no avoiding the fallacies of the non-existent position and the non-existent reason, the response he has given is no answer at all.
아야 되게 저다 되래 가서 변나 시치기 된다 근데 취재님 게다요 시치 된다 로진 게다요 시가 말했었죠 자시 러리 찐로 자시나 오래 러리 찐 많이 받는 자시기 돈도 어찌든 용시가 말로 와서 이제 주제에 된다 라라기 내봤다도 이제 된다 튀시가 말로 왔어요. 나다들.
So what is really stating here is now, by focusing on one locus, there will not be correct and incorrect. If it is incorrect, then it should be incorrect. If it's correct, then it should be correct. Because when the correct consciousness is produced, and then incorrect consciousness will diminish as by product of as by virtue of having the correct consciousness. For instance, someone who has eye disease, seeing the hair falls, the falling hairs, and as soon as the eye consciousness is, as soon as the person's eye consciousness, the disease of eye consciousness is overcome, then the correct eye consciousness is generated, and therefore, then such seeing the falling of hairs will no longer be there.
아야, 이제가 저 오미게 따와텔라 페바 되겠잖아요. 네, 대바 마주기 빼라. 야쇼에네 러리 진짜 자세자가 됐어. 러리 진짜 자세세데 밀레 전형의 지기 마도 거의 때는 대상에 주고 말했어. 엄마 탄지로. 엄마 런지 빠지 가서 집에 가서 주민 땅한테 빼야쇼래서. 얘네 이 소치 용거래서. 근데 손진도
So things that does not ultimately exist, for the the example of things doesn't exist ultimately in according to Svatantrika Prsangika. The example is someone who has eye disease seeing a hair falls is a good example. And for the Svatantrika, their example is to seeing elephants and horse of the magicians. Magicians conjure the elephants and horses and so on.
이게 엄마 주반으로 몬쳐도 자세 송셔 성도 가자.
So in the Svatantrika Prsangika, Svatantrika Avatara, where the example is given mostly the someone who has inaccurate eye consciousness sees the hair falls.
그때 그저 여자하고 위주로 나 저기다 밀에 전에 비걸로 포바카보 가장 놀러라. 근데 다 비걸로 포바노라 자스사서 사는 돈도 라바 창쇼도.
So it is quite, this kind of experience may have happened to many people, even if we may know that, because when we have certain sicknesses that causes inaccurate eye consciousness, which generates seeing something that doesn't exist, right? For instance, if you have a white ball being in front of oneself, and you will see the hairs falls, and hairs are falling and dropping into that container. That is due to our inaccurate eye consciousness. Have you heard anything about that? That's what we call the inaccurate eye consciousness, which sees the hair is falling into our hair is falling, even though the hair is not falling. This kind of, do you guys hear anything about this kind of disease? Inaccurate eye consciousness due to their sickness? This cause of inaccurate eye consciousness exists in the faculty of eye itself. It is nothing to do with the object, but it's more to do with the faculty of eye consciousness itself.
Then as Chitan Digi Deshit, the old new that sit around in the Java Duman. That is actually in the shit the old new. Then the Zuji Chin, the dollar Joa made the Zuji, the dollar Joa made the Yubi Shed. Then the Sevi Pumbasiano, Shibi Joala, Chana, told how a date in the Shiba shower also.
So then it says the sensory perception and so forth could actually perceive something that's with something to prove through the refute, and not that but as they do not, I cannot be faulted. Well, this is gone. So this will the last second with the thought. I will explain this passage based on the following syllogism, since using the example for examples makes this easier to understand. Subject in a visible form, predicate is not produced from itself, and reason is because it exists. An example, like the pot that is right in front of you.
지단에 가서 변에 달리 전에 저 토메도 로고로 디 제수 탄예스게마 저 되면 되죠. 제비 되요 말에 저를 토바요 말. 그래서 달리 제거여서는 주주니 주 크로크로를 제거하는 세대. 다 간지 달리 제세디.
So here it says, if we accept there's something that produces from itself, then this become there is no separate cause is needed for certain things to produce.
변에 제 유나 달리 저 메비 처래. 변에는 무슨 되는 여기 bomba데 코코로를 제거 말어. 당 무슨 유튜브로 bomba 코코로에 쏘고 말어. 가자 처음 계속 메시와 제 탄예장지 시와 있나.
For instance, like the pot, in a pot doesn't exist. Pot doesn't produce by itself, isn't it? Pot produce the production of pots requires a lot of causes and conditions. It doesn't produce by itself.
네, 고라와시 데이트네 시바샤오 손도. 근데 렌지 좀 대다 개네서 최제天나도 메루루 떠나지. 대양 제다 이냐나. 데레 슈거 강당天나도 주비 수 나天나도 주비 최제 민주비 민주루 땜바 땜비 슈거 되네 세세레 손비 겁데 다제 고비 슈거를 이메 장 제네 오보 나라 때 담바 란신 여반데 병보 모와다 타녀도 대달라 랑게 세니지 주 란신 여반데 오마 라지 바니까 예노 오마 라지 발라 모니메 바마시 세메 장 데네 치소 좀비 셰더 란신메 바마시 바네 탄저로 샤오 어선도 제가 다지 간데天나도 주 무주 생에데 제다다 다제 고살데 이나야 오마 라지 바다 아니 나데니라 코로나 요레선도.
The passage of the clear words that replies Bhaviveka shows that the subject is not established as appearing in common to the two parties in this debate. How do they show this? And here in this sections, the clear word states that those to whom it demonstrates how one cannot establish a subject in common with the opponent are those who refute protection from itself, and that is the Svatantrika. But in general, the opponent of the clear word are both the clear words are both the establishes who accept the things that ultimately have intrinsic nature, and the Svatantrika who refute that must accept that things conventionally have intrinsic character or the intrinsic nature. The Svatantrika Madhyamaka are called non-essentialists. However, so as to simplify this terminology in these discussions, opponents of intrinsic existence will refer to the Prasangika, and advocates of the intrinsic existence will refer to the both essentialists and Svatantrika.
야, 내가 때 고대부터 찾아. 저다 최제 세세기 단대 용장네. 최제天나도 주 무주 세세대다 실어발 다친 곳에 데레스. 얘나요. 뭐보나 대바 주고 뭐하게 니 라지바 매체세에 맞다 생각봐. 뉴스 도박이 대바 주고 뭐 이제 대다레스. 아니 엄마 라지바에 타니도 추탄제랑 게 세니지 주가 켈린다디 엄마 라지바야 최제天나도 주 마주 세세게 니 쇼글이요. 예서.
So it actually, so it says that clear words states that those to whom it demonstrates how one cannot establish the subject in common with the opponents are those who refute the production from itself. That is the Svatantrikas. It's just very clear, right? And then, but in general, the opponent of the clear words are both the essentialist, Buddhist essentialist, not a non-Buddhist, and then who accept that things ultimately have intrinsic characters. And the Svatantrika will refute that both but accept the things conventionally have intrinsic character or the intrinsic nature.
Yeah. When you said about mentioning the number something about mentioning the number to a calendar, Uma Raji Baye, Rashi to a calendar, any Uma Tanji, this is a Kanga Kagre, said the young Chichi Bobe Chichiro.
So, so these are now in a general, the way the different Buddhist philosophical tenets accepts, how things really are. It is, for instance, the Chittamatrans who accepts things that exist ultimately, whereas Madhyamaka Svatantrikas things they reject the existence of the ultimately existence of things and event. It's completely rejected, and whereas and likewise Madhyamaka Prsangika rejects not only ultimate existence but the intrinsic existence.
Uma Raji Balango member Malagres, they are seeing Dota Tangeremado, any Rashi to a member Matanja Gogres and so on.
It says now, it says, even though the Madhyamaka Svatantrika Madhyamaka is also called non-essentialist. However, it says so as to simplify the terminology in discussions, opponents of the intrinsic existence will refer to them Prasanghikas, because it just, although they Madhyamaka Svatantrika is called as a non-essentialist, but they do accept, intrinsic character of things in event.
I think the Pena Pabatome sends on the Shinta Senjure Segre, and the Pabatome de Oma Rajiba, the Oma Taji, Tawa de Toya Maruas and the Tikacha Marua. Oh, Chorindo, which is Rebicala, the Tawa Tela Penejan, the Temper, Mother Ranji, Ranigi, Tawa Tela Pen, the Toba Chile Chain Bicala, Piche, Jachakuchu, Mataja Chagramado, Tawaji, Togu Marua. Mado, you might get the children dinner yonder Ladeba. You might do Baden Dawa Drabadan. Mother, no venture the Chera visited any Omataja Cheta neighbors at Tetation or Sunday said, go coaching Jeremado, best Sigma de Severo. Then take it out 10 years ago, each ever changing it out and a thing again, and a title on the silver thing in the bar. Not your petition it, but there's any 10 days Chamagan and never say the Messido, Mazabatawa.
So, although the Asangas, the master Asangas are said to be this the travelers or of the revealer or the travelers of the mind-only school or the Chittamatrans school. That doesn't mean that Asanga has no view of Madhyamaka or the Madhyamaka Prasangika, in other words. Similarly, that I have mentioned that during one of my sessions during the previous session, that such as Dharmakriti and Dignas are said to be the proponent of the Lord's system, the Lord's schools, or the Lord philosophical tenets. That doesn't mean they do not have this Madhyamaka Prasangika standpoint, because it is just during that time and certain time they may have uphold those view, the standpoint of the Vaivashika or the standpoint of Svatantrika and standpoint of mind only or the Chittamatra. In general, it doesn't mean that all those great masters have do not have the view of Madhyamaka Prasangika. Not at all.
Miki get non de tabi colada, when a jib about to what the Richie inside the sang chair, the Tajinoji Thomas in the Dame was in. Yale Oma Rajiba cases the Galada, Oma Rajiba mother does some into sang in the chip. But the chrono and common non behaviors of the child. The Ganjan and Yanes Kichomaro Conshiro. That in Oma Taja, because the better young Tomatoka Levis on it. There, Conshiji, mother. For Ganjan and Rosa, Kill Marama.
It is, for instance, we ourselves, or take my example as myself, when I first studied, beginning studying the business philosophy, we began to, study the lower philosophical tenets, such as Viveka and Svatantrika, begin from that. And then when during that time, we always think that whatever that is established, that is said in the text, in accordance with the Viveka's and Svatantrika's standpoint, that was the right standpoint. I always accept that this is the right and this is how it should be. But then when we go from that, when we advance to the modern school, when we go, as we, advance from one level to another, then again we see that the whatever that we have studied previously, according to Viveka's and Svatantrika's standpoints. Now, when you are actually entering into this mind only, then you see that mind only is more profound than their understanding of how things really are. And then, of course, when we transit from that level to the Madhyamaka's level, particularly the Madhyamaka Prsangika, then you will see that whatever that I have learned during that by following that in the mind only school is something that really serve as a reasoning, something that really serve as a stepping stone for really getting myself into the understanding of the point that is being made by the Madhyamaka Prsangikas. So this is how it should go. When you are in that particular school, when you are studying that particular school, you are a system of that particular school. And then when you go advance, then you will go your view shifts from one level to another level.
Tobaka Gonjo Teacher Martina, Tibasum Kang Journal of Tugumarwa. The social in Martin of Sona Chico dating in the Jingle Checker, Jin Chetu.
So as long as one is gain the realization of lack of intrinsic existence of things and event, one will not be able to advance from one spiritual path to the advanced spiritual path. That will not happen to us. We will remain, even though one may rigorously practice for a long period of time, one will not be able to advance from the path of accumulation. One will remain only in path of accumulation, will not be able to advance from that state.
Oma Raji Paran, Alemoni Mebamo, Member Jang Sidi Jumbi, Raji Memone, Tanjo Salachi. Raji Yobamo, Shepa, Obama, Ranjib, Nikalako, Shao, Wasson, Zuji Jinchi Chechen. You are a Zuji Jinchi Chechen, the Jabba there, Julutene, Yen Zimbi, Miki, Shipping, Musun, Semer, Jugula. Deo Machuba de Dake Maduna, Den Jubi, Muson de Mironye, Machuba Goso, Achi. Tome Machuba Jubane, de Dake Lula, Anla Machuba Sunsa, Deye Rangi Seni Juba de Nashi, Nawata Yoba, Nieba Turso, Adena, Sugar La Sema, Chendrashi get Church, Jubi Sema. 얘네 하고라 론테 슈 강나 한게 체니지 주변 뭐 타네도 내베 내 주제 제처럼 메비 시로냐도 호벤데 오네 장진고 봐 니노 그래서
According to the advocates of the intrinsic existence, the visible form, the state subject of the syllogism, the stated subject of the syllogism must be established by the valid perceptual cognition of the visual consciousness that perceived it. So, and moreover, if those consciousnesses did not establish the visible form in as a non-mistaken way, then they could not be a perceptions that establish their objects. Hence, they must be non-mistaken. To non-conceptual perception establish their object in a non-mistaken conceptual perception to establish their object in the non-mistaken way. In non-Prasangika system, an object exists by way of its intrinsic character, appears to any consciousness that is non-mistaken with respect to the object. Moreover, the object must exist just as this appears to consciousness. As this is the case, the Prasangika say that the kind of valid cognition that established the subject for the essentialist or essentialist opponent will not work for the Madhyamika proponents. Why? Since no phenomena can even conventionally have a natural nature that is established by way of intrinsic character. There is no valid cognition that establish such things. It is with this in mind that the Master Chandrakirti refutes that the notion of autonomous syllogism. This also explains how to refute the needs of autonomous syllogism as a part of process of initially instilling in others the view that knows the things that lack intrinsic characters.
아야 네그 가르사 엄마 탄제 루지야 제디 네 체체티나데 조세데 메시아로 오지 성을 가르사나 엄마 탄제와 이게서 시저데 인데 라지바기 체체인데 세마수 체체라 라지 쪽에 베나 미 나소이나 미시기 주 라차마 예사라 그러 미 예수도 세마레다 네 미시들 추시래라고 엄마 탄제 추시이나 뭐로이 먹었어 그래 통화를 추 나야 셴발을 추야 말이야. 인자네 간제 오마 란지바예 오마 탄지와예 아니 슈 오마 란지바다 냥도예 치체 텐나 조세데 시그마레서 알. 랑게 체니 좀 시작되는 비기 되도록 거기가 이 그런 지지 힘 셴사도 쏘거든. 조소지 추 간제지나 랑게 체니 좀 봐데 시불을 슈점 쉬어져야 란지바.
So there now, if you in this case, there isn't any subject that can be established commonly for both, Madhyamaka Prsangika and Svatantrikas, isn't it? Because whatever that must be exist, it must be exist. Whatever that exists, it must be exist intrinsically in accordance to Madhyamaka Svatantrika. Whereas the Madhyamaka Prsangika rejects intrinsic existence across the board in an entire spectrum of phenomena. Madhyamaka Prsangika doesn't accept even the slightest intrinsic existence of any phenomena. So therefore, there isn't any commonly appearing subject that can be established for both the parties. Because the Madhyamaka Svatantrikas, the subject is existed intrinsically, whereas the Madhyamaka Prsangika subject doesn't exist intrinsically. The intrinsic existence is rejected by Madhyamaka Prsangika, and non-intrinsic existence of things in event is rejected by the Madhyamaka Svatantrika. So it is therefore there cannot be find any common subject.
대야 네 대야 쉬르 대야 파르볼라스 뭐버 장심에 뭐 또비 또사데 제베야라도 라진 라지 거방고비 수치바 인제 오마 탄조와 나 핀지제 야 진입이 등 가시 또비 제바 제베야라도 라지 그 라지 거 뭐그제 시바네 레시자고 어성때 맞아 라지 지때 태그 말했어야 돼 아니 오마 탄저가 따와 라지 레체베 양라들라 라지 태그 말해서 까바레마도 아니 쪼바쪼비 되나 말해서
The next is, so leave aside for the time being analysis of whether Prasangika need to use the autonomous syllogism among themselves as a part of process of developing the inferential knowledge of the certain object among the diverse conventional objects. Now let me explain this by tying my analysis to Chandrakirti's text, the meaning of this passage. Therefore, as one accepts the refutation of the productions, himself must accept that this is so is the follows, the basis of the probandum as a subject such as the I or the form that breakdowns that is not established in reality. So this is something that Bhaviveka himself accepts. What are those subjects? I and a form, like something found to have in own existence by inaccurate existence, affected by the ignorance. This means the conventional consciousness, such as the visual, consciousness, established the object. So how it is that the Bhaviveka himself must accept this. Okay.
당연히 되게 자신다. 어쨌든 제가는 그냥 교수라고 했잖아. 빛이 준다. 타마타마 대다리 소지 도와줄 지도고 맞도매. 근데 제가 제가는 제는데 괜히만 교수라는 대샤로 지라.
그래서 내가 단지 준다 당부 때가 코마서는지.
알레서 인디
단지 제메 준다 들어봐.
알레 다리 인기도.
몰라 다른 얘기.
네. 그 가세 제쇼다.
숨주봐도 예 숨배름지.
손주바데 손주는 같이 묻지도.
So we'll stop here with this today, and so the next month's teachings. So I'm unable to translate the first week, which means the next Sunday I may not be able to translate. I have something came up, and then Rinpoche said he's available till the 30th of this month, and then from 30th of this month he will be traveling somewhere.
아마서 되게 아니 주서 지니래라. 아니 거네 지 가르쳐버다 뒤좀뭐 아니 다 아니게 시 아니 그래서 대한 좀 선언 다네. 대장지 이제서 연락지 주에게 근데 지로 왔다 뒤서 내리지라. 니 롱바 뭐지라 마 추다 메게다 메지다 친지기 올라. 만에 지면 니마츠는 처음에 저기 대두를 거라. 내가 아니 들으기 계속 좀 뭐지라. 담비 저기 친해 제도야. 네 가시 거시 대도야. 소송만에 네 제서 연락지네. 제다라야 됐어요. 뭐 제거는 뭐 제거 어떻게 처벌해도 상시 제거. 제다.
So for dedicating our merits that we have accumulated by taking our time and engaging in this Dharma discussions. And it is very fortunate for all of us to be able to have such a wonderful opportunity to take our time to engage in this meaningful discussions, even though the subject itself is very profound and quite, challenging. Rather, it is more convoluted, but we are taking our time and trying our best to whatever that we can, understand. And it will very, gives a wonderful imprints within one's mindstem if one listens to these teachings with wholeheartedly, even though one may not be able to grasp on all the meanings. So we are very fortunate because to think about that other part of the world, there's a lot of problems going on, the war, and they do not know, even though they are alive today, but they are not certain that what will happen to them, after a couple of minutes, after a couple of hours, and so on and so forth. And living in such situation, think about that, for what kind of situation it may be if one is in these situations. So we are really fortunate that we are having such a wonderful time to engage in Dharma discussions, and may all our merits to dedicate towards all other sentient beings, and think of all those beings who are deprived of this opportunity. By doing this, may my discussions of this Dharma become a cause of actualizing the ultimate bodhicitta, and as well as ultimate bodhicitta, as well as the conventional bodhicitta. By means of these two, generating these two bodhicittas, may I be able to benefit all other sentient beings, and may all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas bless me to be able to do this.
天南地往马林中人呢，现在人王的人家做，小别身的宝多的牛金，江边不远之大城堡，更多上坡的样的人的，得到根据就是道路。天王得到当街肉多么，就送新兵叫我当街。我刚老求得我把的，那先给人早晚的给，从不谢谢绕多我。哎呀，多谢天主。
Thank you, Rinpoche. Thank you, Nimala.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Rinpoche.
嗯，人家那个，
Yeah, took
Yeah,
two
no,
mango.
Tango.
Hmm?
You done?